Hello, 7th grader. I am here with Miklan Tekutli to talk with you about all of the amazing people and places you will be studying this year, and to give you this learning tool called GRAPES. You may have used it before. It is this mnemonic that stands for geography, religion, arts and achievements, politics, economics, and social structures. Everything that you can be looking at as you learn about all of these people and their thoughts and the way that they lived life. So it's 3 quick parts. The first is just a look, activating your brain, getting it ready for what is coming up and the people that you will be studying. One quick plug about the way that our brains work and how to maximize your time learning. And then we're going to look at the acronym GRAPES. You tell me what it stands for, and then we'll just break it down. Geography, religion, arts and achievements. What questions can you be thinking about with each group of people that you study? And this is what I use truly for my brain for every group of people that I study. It is a note-taking device broken down into geography, religion, arts and achievements, because I find that is what actually helps the information stick. Another learning tool that I love, as you will see, are flashcards, right? You're going to be learning about Timbuktu. And this is actually all the flashcards that I made in the process of getting ready to teach and learn about 7th grade world history. How can you get all of this information to stay in your brain and influence how you think and who you are and what you know about the world? That is why we are here. So let us jump in to part 1. I recommend using a pencil. Sometimes people get upset if they put guesses and thoughts in pen and have to cross it out. I have no shame. I don't mind writing in pen, but you know you best. So pick whichever utensil works for you. This is what I want to know from you. We have some images here. This year, you are lucky enough to be learning about. I want you to use your brain and then talk with other people. Fill in these missing blanks. So for example, for number 1, I'm looking here at this clue. I say, oh, that looks like the Colosseum. And so for number 1, I'm going to put in, I know this year we're going to be learning about the fall of the Roman Empire. So please use these images, what you already know, and each other's brains to take 5 minutes. We're going to pause and fill in what you think the answers are. What did you get? We know number 1, fall of the Roman Empire, the western half in 476, and then you're going to study the Byzantine Empire. For number 2, you may have seen these 5 pillars up there. If you are Muslim, you may have known right away that it's for Islam. And so you're going to be studying faith, fasting, pilgrimage, prayer, and alms as 5 really important components of this world religion and how it grew and expanded and contributed to our understanding of the world. For number 3, you may have recognized Confucius, because you'll be taking a look at medieval China. And also, if you look on a map, you'll see Mongolia above it, relationships with Mongol people. Number 4, This is a modern rendition of Sundiata Keita, because you will be learning all about medieval West Africa. Sundiata Keita also being known as the Lion King. He's the first emperor of Mali. Next to Sundiata Keita, we have a samurai, because number 5 is all about medieval Japan and Bushido, right? The samurai code of conduct, haiku, Shintoism. Number 6 is about the storming of the castles, the Black Plague, the Crusades. It's all about medieval Europe. For number 7, here you see an eagle eating a snake atop a prickly pear. You may recognize it from which flag? Mexico's flag. Number 7 is all about medieval or Middle Ages Mesoamerica. And you'll see that there are 4 spaces for Mesoamerica. Because in Mesoamerica, for O, you're going to be learning all about Olmec people, famous for the huge 6-foot stone heads that they created. M, for the mathematicians, Mayan people during this medieval time. For number 10, the A is related to the Mexican flag and Mictlantecutli, because it is for Aztec. And number 11, you'll be traveling into South America in what is now Peru and Chile, because that I stands for Incan people in history. And number 12, the educators making these standards said, you know what? Let's also talk about the scientific revolution. And there is so much fascinating science in all of these different groups of people that you are going to be learning about, especially when it comes to stars and what people were able to figure out based on looking up at the sky at night. That's it. That is part number 1. All the people and places that you are going to be studying. Here is my quick plug before we look at this great mnemonic. Quick, because I can get overly excited about it. Just 3 things. As we learn in life, we build our schema. You may already know about schema. I didn't learn about it until I was in college. Your schema is everything that you believe right now. That's your schema, made up of schemas. For example, if I say to you the word dog, each of us has all of these schemas. And I like a word web to kind of represent what a schema is. It's everything that you think of when you hear this word, schema. And that's our job, right? As we are teaching and learning, is to develop our schema and figure out what is true. How do we do that? Number 14, to help information stick in our schema, we can make mnemonics, a term that you also may or may not have heard before. A mnemonic is a learning tool that helps you remember something. That's it. It can be a joke that you can come up with. I used a mnemonic earlier to remember the 5 pillars of Islam, and I remember it as FFPPA. FFPPA. That it's faith, that it's fasting for the month of Ramadan, no food or drink during sunlight hours. PP is for pilgrimage, also known as the Hajj, that you do at least once in your lifetime. Prayer, 5 times a day. And then A is for alms. And this idea that you should give resources and wealth to people who are less fortunate than you. FFPPA is a mnemonic. And so you can have, this has helped me through life, make mnemonics. And then my last thing is just a plug for literacy, reading. It's the best. When we were little, we learned to read, but now, here you are in 7th grade, we read to learn. So it's just putting in a plug for the old textbook and for reading reliable sources online. Reading is so empowering. It makes you so strong. So we read to learn. That's it. That was my plug for thinking about how your brain works. I am going to power on. You can feel free to pause because we're moving on to part 2. And part 2 is simply me asking you about the mnemonic that people have created to remember all the various parts of a civilization, a group of people who has organized themselves. So what do you know? You tell me. I'm going to ask you to pause and take 5 minutes. What I'd like you to do, see where it says the grapes mnemonic is a powerful way to help your schema hang on to information. The acronym GRAPE stands for. Please take a look. Again, you can do it on your own and then compare with somebody else to see what they got. When you hear water, topography, vegetation, climate, and human interaction with the environment, that G stands for geography. When we talk about grapes, the G is all about the geography of a place and how that influenced the way people lived. Done. Your turn now for R, A, and A, P, E, and S. Look at the parentheses and then fill in what you think that letter stands for.
Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne...
We are back. What did you get? The R, about deities, deity, text, symbols, locations, and leaders. You are going to be looking at every group's religion. The A's. The A's are so exciting. Literature, drama, visual arts, the legacy contributions from this group of people to the rest of the world. Those A's are arts and achievements. And a student one time said to me, Miss, it's like STEAM, yet another mnemonic. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. What are the things that this group of people discovered, thought about, explored that they left for the rest of us? The P, I always think of power as you look at leaders, locations, laws, and the distribution of power among the people. The P is for politics. E, we see here resources, currency, trade, the distribution of wealth. That E is economics, which you will look at for every group of people. How they bought and sold material goods. And then the S's are for social structures. And a lot of that is about families and about neighborhoods. It's the arrangement of relationships and the interactions between people, including family structures. That's it. Grapes. That's what this mnemonic stands for. Helps me every single time in organizing this information in my head. Because one last thing. Does this information stick after one time? Do you just make a card about Timbuktu and then you know all about Timbuktu? No. It's great. You got to talk about it. Read it about again. Put it on a note chart like this. Maybe do a triple column note-taking thing as you're reading, right? For our schema to really hang on to something, we got to dig deep, make connections, and talk about it a lot. That's exactly what we're going to do as we turn for our first G, which you know stands for geography. You can pause at this point and come back to geography or you can power through. Because this is what we are going to do. We're now in part 3. We're just going to look at each letter. We're going to do a schema box where I want to know everything that comes to your mind when you think of that letter, such as geography. I'm going to recommend that you also compare it with other people's, see what you have in common and what might be unique to what each of you thought of. And then we're just going to look at 5 or 6 questions for each category that if you think about it for each group of people as you go through, you're going to start making these patterns that really put these ideas into your brain. So that said, I want you to take 60 seconds. You'll see, here's the question. What words and things come to mind when you hear the word geography? I'm going to look at mine. My first word is rivers. Take 60 seconds and really think about geography in your life and in what you've studied before. I'll see you in 60 seconds. All right. What did you get? I'm going to share my brain with you. You can cross out anything you and I had in common. You can add maybe things that I had. I wish I could add in things that you had. And you can either do this along with me, or you can do it with another person in the class. I think of geography. I think of rivers, palm trees, sprinklers, irrigation, desert, concrete, mountains, valleys, streets, dams, reservoir, beaches, rainy season, tides, drought, climate change, heat, faucets, because it's amazing how we get water from one place to another, acorns, and fjord. And that is for my dear friend Maggie, who is moving to a place that has fjords in Norway. Schema, geography. Okay. I would like you now to fill in what you think are the missing words in these 6 questions below that have to do with geography. We'll do the first one together. The first one is all about water, which is life and necessary for a group of people to live. What is this civilization's for water? If it has rivers, what are they like? Are they predictable? Are they flooding? Are they scary and unpredictable? Do the people there use irrigation? Number 1 for geography is always figuring out what's their source for water. Water for crops, water for drinking, water for bathing, water for perhaps transporting goods and themselves from one place to another. Please pause me and take 4 to 5 minutes, read through and fill in what do you think these other words are that have to do with geography. And we're back. Geography, water, and vegetation, which means for number 2, what kind of plants does this civilization have? How do people use them? So crucial to how people live. I always think of the Nile and papyrus, which is how they made paper. So vegetation for each group. Topography, all about the shape of landforms. Are there mountains, valleys, deserts? What are the important landforms that really impact life for each of these people? And do they determine boundaries? Next up is climate, which is what is the weather over the course of a year. Right? And what are their different seasons? And how does that impact what they wear and when they pray and all the things that make life? Climate and weather, so important for each group. Number 5, how does each geographic feature affects the people and the way that they live? Do they help keep invaders out? Provide good fertile farmland? What resources does the environment provide for food, clothing, shelter, and goods to make and trade? Where you live so deeply affects how you live. And yes, for number 6, it also affects the ways in which people change the environment to make it work for them, right? We talked about dams, both for good and for bad. That's it. That's geography. Every time you are looking at a group of people, whether it's medieval Japan or medieval West Africa, how does the geography influence everyday life? Check. Next up for our religion. I love seeing what people put in their schema box for religion. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do now. Same as last time. Take 60 seconds, put it on the clock. Bing! Write down everything that comes to your mind when you think of religion. For me, the first word that I put was God. 60 seconds, go. And we're back. I've got my schema box here. You've got your schema box. Again, you could pause right now and compare your thoughts and schema with somebody else's. Lightly cross out what you have in common. Circle what you didn't. And what we're going to do now is we've got 5 questions. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. We pause it. Fill in the blanks. For these questions, you can always ask about the religion of a group of people. For example, number 1, we'll do together. Deity, como Dios, or deities, is gods and goddesses. Is this civilization theistic or polytheistic? Who is their main god or gods? And what do we know about them? Based on your knowledge from ancient civilizations last year, you may have put in mono. For monotheistic, meaning people who believe in just one God. Please take 4 to 5 more minutes, pause it, and fill in what words you think are missing. And we're back. The first 2, I bet you got pretty fast. Because for texts, the question is, what were this civilization's sacred texts? How were they communicated? What do you find interesting about them? And is there an origin story about how the land and or the people were created? And we ask how they were communicated because in some cases they are written texts, right? Symbols put on a surface. But in other cases, for example, in West Africa, you're going to have griots, people who would tell stories, right? And the stories would get passed down generation to generation. You're going to look at how in Incan society, they created quipus, right? And this system of knotting threads to communicate. Fascinating. You are in for such a good year. Next up is, were there any religious symbols? And you have some here on your paper. Draw them and explain what they meant. For number 4, locations, the question is, where? Where did people worship? I always think of the ziggurats in Mesopotamia. Right? This you'll be learning about the Kaaba. Did this civilization have religious buildings? What did they look like? What materials were they made out of? And are there reasons that they looked the way they did? Like those steps leading up to the sky. And then finally, the last question for each group, religious leaders. Who were the civilization's religious leaders? What were their responsibilities? Did they also have political power? just like last year? Usually the answer is yes. And then this very important question of how did they come to power? How were they chosen? Check. R, religion. Next up, we have art and achievements. Again, it's like STEAM, right? The science and technology and engineering and arts and mathematics. Basically, it's what happens when you get a food surplus, so that instead of going out and hunting and gathering, you bring the food to you in a predictable way, which then gives your group more time. There are some people who can start thinking about stuff, making stuff, and that's where we get to arts and achievements. You know what to do. This is the schema box. We're going to take 60 seconds. You write down everything that you think of when you hear the word art and you hear the word achievement. My first word was music. I'll see you in 60 seconds. Welcome back. I've got my list. You've got your list. I highly recommend you look at what other people think of when they think of art and achievement. Cross out what you have in common. Maybe you both have protest. And circle anything that is unique to you. You can either pause and do that now if you haven't done it already, or you can roll into the 5 questions we consider for art and achievement in each civilization. We're going to do the first one together. And again, it's pretty easy to figure out because it's about stories. And the answer for number 1 is the word, darn it, I couldn't find it, but it's stories. What stories did people pass on from generation to generation? Are there famous poems or novels that you know of in this civilization? Like you might get to read excerpts from The Tale of Genji. Was there a system of writing, or how about oral tradition? Every group has stories. I'm so excited for you to learn about each civilizations that they have. Take the next 4 minutes, 5 minutes, pause me, and fill in what you think are in the blanks. And we're back. I found the stories card, and I found number 2 about drama. Were there any famous plays produced? And did people go to see performances together? It's this universal human call to create drama and reenact stories and watch one another, feel things. For number 3, this is about the visual arts of each society. Did people create any 3-dimensional art, such as statues? You know, we were talking about Olmec society and the stone heads that you may have seen. You can look at 3-dimensional art and what was their purpose, what the subjects were of that art. And then how about 2-dimensional art, right? That just has height and width. What are some examples of that? And it's always so interesting with art to think, well, what was their purpose? Why did people create it? Was it for political power? Was it because they were getting paid to do a portrait of somebody? Was it for protest? What was the purpose of the different arts in that group? And then finally, our last fill in the blank is about achievements. Were there any distinct achievements that this civilization contributed to the world? Spoiler alert for every society, the answer is yes. Consider language, architecture, the S is for science. Again, you're going to see so many astronomers and observations about the stars, and technology. Also, who did this group of people influence and who influenced them? Arts and achievements. Check. A is done. And we are halfway through grapes. Do you see how useful it is for helping the brain organize all this information? I love grapes. Both the mnemonic and the snack. All right, we are on to P and our schema box for politics. Also, always fascinating to see what people think of when they hear the word politics. You've got 60 seconds. Think about politics and what words come to mind. I will say for me, the first word that came to mind was elections. 60 seconds. Go. All right. I've got my schema box for everything that came to my mind when I think of the word politics. Check with somebody else. Cross out what you have in common. Circle things that are distinct. So now that you've activated your schema about politics, please take 4 or 5 minutes to fill in these blanks. We're going to do the first one together. Leaders in each of these societies. Who had the power? So politics is all about. What was the distribution of power in the group? How did leaders come to power? Also hugely important. Who is at least one famous leader? Describe them and why they are still remembered today. Take another 4 minutes. What goes in these remaining blanks about politics? We're back. We're thinking about politics. Number 2 is, did the civilization have laws? And what are some that we know of? Did they treat people differently based on how much money they had, their family history, or what jobs they did? Just like King Hammurabi. Were laws written down, or were they passed on orally generation to generation? Laws in each of these groups of people. Next up is locations of political power for these groups of people. Because number 3 is where? Where were the centers of power? And where did leaders work and live? Next up for politics is about the interaction with religion. What did you get for number 4? Because it's, were politics and religion separate in the civilization or combined? And what is some evidence for your answer? Again, spoiler alert, much like last year, usually the answer is combined. And we see that in this final question, which also bleeds over into economics. And it's about taxes and tribute and loyalty and control. So it's, did the people need to pay taxes or tribute to their government to send in food or people to show loyalty to the person who claimed power and authority in their area? That's P. That's politics. Check. We've got 2 letters left. And they're both so interesting. The next one is E for economics. We only have 2 schema boxes left. And this is your chance to say everything you think of when you hear this word, economics. My first word was money. Take 60 seconds, activate your schema, write it down, and I'll see you soon. All right, here is my economics schema box. You may have already shared with a partner, looked. If not, you can pause, cross out what each of your brains had in common. I do bet both of you had money, because that's the heart of this question of economics. When you look at each group, let's look at, we have these 6 questions that you can consider. The first is about resources and trade. I love the marketplaces in each group that you are about to study. The marketplace, there's always so much stuff going on. So this first question is about the environment. What sort of did the geography of this land naturally provide? The answer is goods. Did they have a surplus of anything? Makes me think about gold and salt. What items did people produce? What did they create? And was there a marketplace? Now it is your turn for these remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blanks. What do you think it is? What do you think these questions are about when it comes to economics? All right, economics, what did you get? Number 2 is about currency, right? An agreed upon form of paying for something. Did the people only trade and barter things directly? Saying, I've got a donkey. Who has something out there that's worth a donkey? Doing a direct barter, trading things. Or did they create a currency, like our paper currency? If they did create a currency, what did they use for their money? Did they have coins? Did they use shells? Next up is services, right? Things that people can do. What jobs did people do? It's a huge part of the economy. For food, a favorite topic is what did people eat? Always so fascinating, both to see what historians know people ate and how they figured it out. So often it has to do with people's teeth. Did rich people and common people eat the same food? Clothing. What did men, women, and children wear? Right? What did people wear? What did they make it out of? Were there any class differences in what people wore? And finally, for shelter. Again, a huge part of life is what materials do people use to build their homes? Have archaeologists discovered any artifacts that people used to keep in their homes? And also historians. And buildings. What were buildings made out of? A huge part of the economy, which is the letter E, which is now done. Only one letter left in this mnemonic. Do you remember what the S stands for? It stands for social structures. This is it. This is our last schema box together, where for 60 seconds you write down whatever you think of when you think about social structures. Same as last year in ancient civilizations, right? Often societies will organize ourselves in these pyramids of wealth and power and jobs. What do you think of when you think of social structures? Take 60 seconds, and I just want to kick you off. You know that some of my words are about family and generations and neighborhoods. See you in 60 seconds. Welcome back from our last schema box about social structures. Just before we look at 5 of the questions that you can be asking as you look at each group this year, I do just want to share from my schema this one idea that came to mind of a veil of ignorance. Because, one of the reasons we study history is to learn from our mistakes and to choose the way we would like things to be. And of course, you are the future leaders. You are the people who are going to go forth and be the future teachers. So this idea of veil of ignorance when it comes to social structures in a society is by this person, John Rawls. And so it's just something to consider as you are looking at each civilization and their social structure. Is he said, when you're thinking about what is just and what is fair and what society you would want to live in, imagine you were looking at it through a veil of ignorance. And imagine, what if you didn't know who you were going to be in that society? You know how so often in your textbooks and online, there will be these like social pyramids and it's structured, right? This is from last year in the caste system. In each group, think about this veil of ignorance. And if, as is true in life, we couldn't choose who we were going to be in the society, knowing that, how would you design as a society so that no matter who you wound up being in it, life would still feel fair? That is a question to be thinking about. In addition to these last 5 questions here about social structures. Number 1, for class structure. We'll do this one together. Did a person in the society have the same amount of money and the same amount of power as everyone else? If not, what were the social classes? What percentage of people were on? We're only going to do the first one together. And that first one is, did every person in the society have the same amount of money and power? And again, spoiler alert, just like last year and the world today, the answer is no. Take 5 minutes. Let's fill in 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we'll come back for one last time. We are back for the last time looking at social structures. The answer to number 2 was, what percentage of people were on top of the social pyramid? What percentage were in the middle? And what percentage were at the bottom? What factors affected the distribution of money, of wealth, of power? And was social mobility possible? How? For example, right, was there an educational system where people would have equal access to a quality education and then use the power of that knowledge to change their position in society? Mobility is just like, why we call them mobile phones. It's about movement. Oh, and that was number 3. We only have 2 left. For number 4, it's about family structure. How did people organize their families? Did they live with nuclear families, right, where it's just parents and their children, or with extended families for generations? And also looking at gender roles, right? How did gender affect a person's opportunities? And you will look at these opportunities in all of these civilizations that you are studying this year. I hope you have so much fun. I hope that this mnemonic, this system of grapes, really helps your brain process and make connections. The last thing on this page is, for each civilization that you read about, talk about, and think about, think, how does all of this compare to the other groups of humans that you have learned about, including from 6th grade? And what connections come to mind? Because that's really what's going to help cement it in your schema. And most importantly, as it says there, have